All right. After the safety instruction, let's start the session. And as we've heard in the morning, this is about celebrating, but also harvesting. And I think that's what we should do in the panel a little bit in terms of looking at where the impact of the project was. And that is in terms of content, but also institutionally. And I'm going to moderate. I'm Sven Grimm of IDOS. So one of the consortium members, and we have almost all consortiums on this panel. We can do a quick round of introduction if you just give your name and institution. I think most of us have met already, but for those who haven't met individuals, it might be good to do that quick round. And then we can engage in questions. I have prepared a few questions. I will ask rounds of everybody and then see what reactions are to other questions. If you have questions in between, or you think there's a follow-up that I haven't asked and you would really want to dig deeper into, raise your hand and participate. It should be not just a panel entertaining you, but it should be an interactive session. And with that, let's start with that round of introduction, and I'll pass to my left and you can just carry on.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Alessia Chiriatti. I'm from Rome. From Istituto Affari Internazionali. I'm the head of the educational program at EI, and I'm coordinating for EI the PRODIGEES project.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Medelina Hendytio from CSIS. I'm also coordinating a PRODIGEES program for my institution.
Good afternoon. I'm Carlos Dominguez, researcher here at Instituto Mora and co-coordinator of PRODIGEES.
Hello, everyone. I'm Elena Bruni from Lewis University in Rome. And in the last years, I was in charge to coordinate the secondments between Lewis and the other institutions.
My name is Ingrid Schneider from University of Hamburg. I'm a professor of political science, working in the Department of Computer Engineering and working on processes of governance and ethics of the digital transformation. And I was hosting some people from other institutions in Hamburg, and I also did 5 secondments.
Yes, Ingrid is actually the queen of secondments in our project. She's been to every place. That's great. We get the 360-degree picture from her. Let us start. Yes. Let us start. I mean, reminding ourselves of the project's aim is like creating a deeper understanding, comprehensive understanding of the impact of digitalization across the different dimensions of sustainability, so social, economic, environmental, and also its governance. This comes in global key actors in different world regions, and basis was staff exchanges, as you were involved in the project. I would be interested in terms of starting with a celebratory question, so to say. Where did you see, from your personal or institutional perspective, where did you see particular highlights in which the project was successful? And that I would make it a round for everybody. Highlight where it was successful.
So I think when it comes to Luis, I see two main important aspects. The first one, it relates to concerns to the people that are part of our organization, of our institution, like mostly the PhD students and the faculty position that I had the opportunity to go abroad to research on both sustainability and digitalization, but most importantly, I think in research centers and in countries that usually are not, let's say, in their own agenda, and they had the possibility to engage with people and also to make worldwide research in South Africa, in Indonesia, in India, and they collected quite interesting data that they were not even considered in other occasions, because usually our faculty, our PhD students, they go to European institutions, business school in North America, and actually they were really happy and satisfied to conduct research in different countries. So, and I think it's quite important. It's something that it was highlighted this morning, that we need to do more research on sustainability and innovation, but also addressing important issues like inequality, social inequality. And as far as I know from our researchers at Lewis, PRODIGEES made it happen. So they were really satisfied because of that. So I think it was a huge success, not in terms of number. And when I talk about numbers, I talk about the secondments that we were able to achieve at Lewis. But in terms of quality, it was really a huge success for the reasons that I just mentioned. And the second success that I think it happened because of PRODIGEES. It's related with the people that came at Lewis. We had researchers from Indonesia. We had researchers from Stellenbosch, and I think it was quite important for them to, engage with our faculty, but more importantly, our faculty to engage with people like researchers from Indonesia, and even to hear about the project, but also about the research that they were conducting. That it was like, again, very important research, like the digital data collected in Indonesia about terrorism. I remember the presentations of the three scholars. So I think that they were the most important achievements that we had because of PRODIGEES. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I really had the privilege of doing 5 secondments. I got in contact with MGG network in 2017 when Wolf asked me to give a presentation in the digital week of the MGG network. And then since then I was invited every year. And then
Please let go, yes.
Yeah. So I had also the pleasure of meeting many MGG participants, alumni in several years. So we started off in Rio in 2018 to think about the project, and Wolf and Carlos were very active in applying for this program, the RISE program of staff exchange. And for me, it was very good because it was the right project at the right time in my biography, because I could combine what I did 20 years before in terms of technology assessment. I had moved from an interdisciplinary institute towards the computer engineering department, because there was a need to do more on ethics and governance of IT. So, and then I started the first secondment in 2020 here at Instituto Mora. And there was an interruption now because I had to leave earlier because of the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was also a big challenge for PRODIGEES, because for 2 years we couldn't do any secondment, and we didn't know whether this would stay forever or how we could restart. So we had quite some Zoom meetings in terms of keeping the project going. And then I think it took off again. And for me, one of the main lessons is that it's about North-South and South-South cooperation. And this is not a unidirectional process, but a process of really trying to get a mutual understanding of what are the processes of the digital transformation, what's going on in terms also of learning. I learned very much also in the daily life how digitalization affects daily life. And as you know, Germany is not very digitized, but I learned in India or in Indonesia, in terms of financial inclusion, in terms of digitized means of payment, also in Brazil, they are much more advanced. It's also another attitude towards embracing technology. We are more skeptical. Some other countries, they are just enthusiastic about technology, maybe a little bit not risk averse as we are in Germany. So this was also a mutual learning process, I would say. And I think in terms of comparative research, it has triggered a lot of comparative research. I did research on digital platform regulation with respect to data protection, competition policy, and AI regulation. And this was very, very informative because I learned also a lot about the institutional requirements of doing it. So, for instance, I learned very much that it's not sufficient to have law on paper, but you have to have law in practice. So you really have to have public administration which knows about the problems, which really is keen on enforcing existing laws. I also think it's very important to have independent bodies, like an independent data protection authority, which can perform checks not only on the private sector, but also on the public sector, which is a problem in several countries because the executive branch, I would say, is not very keen of being controlled by a transparency and data protection agency. I think that's very important. I learned a lot also in terms of, let's say, Brazil doing a lot in terms of financial inclusion with respect to the PIX system. It's a public sector, let's say. It's similar to the digital public platforms, digital public infrastructure in India. So in that respect, I think several alternatives to the very much market-driven model of digitalization have emerged in India and other countries. And of course, Europe praises itself to provide a way of regulating digitalization vis-a-vis the big superpowers, the US and China. And I think India also proclaims to have a digital sovereignty with respect to charting a fourth way of a digital transformation. So I think it's very important to have more exchange about these views. And in my institute, my students learned a lot from the presentations which were given by the secondees, by Carlos, by Gustavo, by Baltasar from Indonesia. And they were very impressed, and they also wrote it down in their evaluation reports that it was very important for them. And from starting PRODIGEES, I also do one seminar every semester on digitalization in the Global South. And this is very well received. And the students also tell me that it has repercussions because it widens their horizon. Because very often people only look at the US, maybe a little bit to China in terms of the social credit system and surveillance and all that. But there's also not so much literature on what's going on in other countries, at least not so much in an English language. So I think PRODIGEES really had a big impact on that. And I think building alliances now is more urgent than ever, because there is also a big threat of, what I would term it, digital imperialism. So I think we have to join forces. And that's also something, I think the MGG network is also something which will continue the network. And I think the network has also been strengthened by the PRODIGEES project. So I think it's a mutual process of joining forces and strengthening. And last not least, I think it's not just collaboration, academic collaboration, but it's also creating relationships and hopefully lasting friendships. That was very, very nice, very enriching, amazing project.
Thank you very much. And I should probably explain that we are here as the steering committee members, those steering committee members that are present, so that the selection of institutions that we have here is clear to everybody. Maybe I continue with the IDOS, quick sentence on that. I always advertise our MGG program as it's learning with each other and from each other. And I think no project has been so true to this particular phrasing than the PRODIGEES project, as in understanding how discussions are happening in other countries. To some extent, discovering digitalization as a country that is, as you rightly said, a country that's not very advanced in it, seeing what is possible in other countries is eye-opening to some extent, and it makes this North-South discussion sort of relativates the dimension. It's really different countries and very different setups that we look into. I was about to ask you about the early career researchers, because Elena had made the point, but you mentioned your students and also this involving students both in secondments but also in getting insights from the different countries. We had the pleasure at IDOS to engage our postgraduate program in going to Brazil. So it was a group of 6, and they did research in the country, which was also, I think, a brilliant experience to them, but also to us. And we said, it's networking, it's personal relationships we're building. Pass on.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, I totally agree with Ingrid regarding the importance of strengthening for the next future, the network and the activities that we already realized within PRODIGEE. And I started to coordinate PRODIGEE's project at TI in the middle of the process, in the middle of the project. So it was 2021, 2022, something like that. But since the beginning, I tried to spread among all the researchers and among all the staff at TI, the possibility to participate to the project. Because since the beginning, I thought that this project is a truly visionary project, and I'm not saying that this because I'm inside the steering committee, I'm here in this beautiful place and beautiful city, but because I'm truly convinced of it, at least for 3 different aspects. The first one is that this project has significantly enhanced researcher exchanges in a way that few other initiatives have managed to do. The second point is the fact that researchers through this project had the chance to navigate, to delve into some aspects, to delve in some topics quite new. I was thinking to the digitalization, to the environmental issues that, of course, are part of research at TI, but that definitely have an important push from PRODIGEE project. So to be implemented, to be improved in terms of research and in terms also of field work. And the third aspect is definitely the importance of connecting the hard skills that are of course related to research and field work and the knowledge of the topics of the research to the soft skills, with the soft skills that are of course connected to the teamwork in team building, a network with the other institutes and with the other researchers. So part of the importance of the topics, the importance of the matters analyzed by the project, so the importance of the partnership between the global north and the global south, but also the south-south cooperation. There is also an important part of we can say, yes, soft skills and human involvement in some way to be part of the same project and to implement the network of every single research. And I stop here.
Thank you. At the beginning, when I was approached to join this initiative, we are so grateful. The positive aspect that I was thinking at that time, it's just very practical, is capacity building, because CSIS has been now is 53 years old, and even 5 years ago we are at the transition process where so many young talented researchers joining CSIS, and we always thinking and find ways how to develop them, improve competency, skill and capacity. And this PRODIGEES was very timely at that time. So we send, I think we managed sending 9 researchers, because to explore research and also doing research in other institutions. But along the time, I was amazed also with the variety of topic of research that related to digitalization. We are not trying to link, something with digitalization, but digitalization itself, covers broad issues that, unimaginable before, because even from CSIS, there are health issues, and then digitalization, digital currency, climate change, and all of those things that also based on the research that had been going on at CSIS. So this double benefits, we got the capacity building opportunity, but also to extend, expand the research that's already conducted at that time at CSIS, and then expand it through PRODIGEES. And then third, when we accept, researchers from other institutions, all of us, watching and learning, we all realize that data collection, dealing with government, with outside, multi-actors are very difficult. But we noticed that the researchers coming to CSIS was very tough, talented, diligent, and got many opportunities to collect the data. Of course, we support them, but this is also inspires us that data collection is important, and you have to focus to find it. So I think that's the 3 things that I want to share. Thank you.
Okay, well, we had to organize a final conference, and we're trying. I think in the case of Instituto Mora, it's useful to mention that we have a very diverse group of researchers that are in different areas, working on history, social sciences, different fields within the social sciences, international cooperation. So it's very, very, very diverse. But if I look back 5-6 years in time, I don't see that digitalization was mentioned that often as a topic that was somehow like crossing the agendas of my colleagues. Therefore, I think the main impact, if I look inside Instituto Mora, is that there's a very interesting, very powerful group of researchers who had bring as part of their agendas the issue and the discussion of not only digitalization, but in general, technological transformation, digital transformation. I don't think any of us changed radically our research agenda, but I think that's good. Like we brought this DNA of digitalization. And I think that's pretty much the case of many of my colleagues. I mean, just to give some examples, I mean, Simone is working on natural resources, climate change, and maybe you were not working directly with digitalization, but the fact that Simone did like 2 or 3 secondments, I don't remember, two secondments, long secondments actually, right? And then he came back and and then he said like, oh, you know, like there's actually this very interesting linkage between digitalization and sustainable development. Or in the case of Paco Porras, who is around here, he works on governance discussions. And then like he went to Bonn and came back and analyzed the intersections between his own topics and the topics of PRODIGEES. Same with Citlali, you know, she was working on education, knowledge sharing, and then I think that's the most important impact. Like really, I remember the first time I had a meeting with them, and I told them, listen, there's this project where there's some funding. Well, we kind of got funding somehow, and it's about going and doing research stays in Germany and potentially in Italy and Austria and whatever. And all you have to do is go there and investigate about digitalization and how it intersects with your work and whatever. And they were like, really? What and then what else we need to do? Well, you write a short piece and you do this and that. Like, it's not such a big deal, right? And in that very first meeting, I remember, I think one of my colleagues asked, but we need to have some common ground, you know, like, how do you define digitalization and what's the basic concept we're going to use? And I'm like, you know, just go and just go and talk with our colleagues, and it's something that is developed, right? And I think there are different concepts and different debates depending on where digitalization is intersecting. And I think what the main result is that we lay the seed for future research. And I see now that digitalization is there. It's not that we change radically our agendas, but it's there, present. We have seminars with our students, theses that are written by our students at the master's level and the doctorate level. And these are topics that we didn't have before, and that our students were not touching upon these topics. And I think that's very important. So teaching thesis direction and in general researching, I think that's what I see, the impact and the potential for the future. I mean, I know that we're going to have another session to talk about the future, but I think many of the secondments are individual. So therefore, somehow right now, many of the work that has been produced is actually part of a network, but at the individual level. And I think that the challenge is now to build more in a collective direction, maybe with different clusters around different topics. I don't know. We'll discuss that. But definitely, the seed has been laid, and it shows great potential for the future.
Thank you. From what I heard, we have successfully, as institutions, have successfully in development speak mainstreamed the topic of digitalization in various and a very broad range of research topics and agendas. I think that's would also hold true on this IDOS side, with the range of colleagues going to different places. One of the elements of why funding from the EU comes is also it has to be policy relevant. One of the requirements is that there's impact created in terms of recommendations or insights that are shared with policymakers, where would you say, have you had particular incentives or even activities that actually got you closer to policy or decision makers through that project? Did it happen, or is that a byproduct of other research?
Can tell you a little bit about my last secondment in Indonesia, because I had the pleasure to have a meeting, an interview meeting with the Digicom, the Ministry of Digitalization, of Communication and Digital. And when I arrived there, there was not only the secretary or one of the heads of this department, but he brought his whole team, 5 people who were working on AI, working on data protection and other things. And we had a 3 hours meeting, and it was very much an exchange, because I could tell them a lot about what happens in China, in other countries, in terms of Brazil, in terms of India, and so on. So at the end, they asked me, can we have your recording? Because it's also of interest to us. So, and I think in many of the interviews I did perform, it was very much also an exchange. Also because I really had lots of interviews, of course, with public administration. And I think there's more awareness building, and it's really a reciprocal process, what's going on. We also had a workshop last, I think it was in April or May in South Africa. And what we did is also to write a policy paper, policy brief for the T20 process, which we now submitted for the South African T20. And it's on media and democracy on digital platforms and the questions of compensation for the data they are collecting, because it's vital for a democracy to have a good system of press and media. So the platforms very much siphon all the advertisement, which was previously one of the sources of financing of the media. So the subscriptions are going down because many people just get their news from social networks. And on the other hand, the ads are going to Google and to Meta. So we wrote this policy paper, which is also directed to policymakers. And for me in South Africa, what was most impressive was a hearing, 4 weeks of hearing of the Competition Commission in South Africa on digital platforms and the media. And there were all kinds, the largest media TV companies, but also community radios, very small publishers. And all of them said that it's a big threat for democracy, what's going on with respect to what's the form of business models of digital platforms, and also that their business model is collapsing. So I found this a very deliberative process. And just 2 weeks ago, the first recommendations came out. And I think the South African process is really, it was a 2-year inquiry. So I think for me, it's a reference model for other countries. And I have just written a grant proposal in doing more of that research in other countries as well. Because in Indonesia, I discovered that they have a so-called publishers, what's the term? Publishers' right. So they also want to let's say, to have the conditionality on the platforms to carry news media and to put them higher in their rankings, to increase the quality of the public sphere. And they also want to have a compensation scheme. This is very early because the law itself, it's relatively fuzzy. So we will see what will come out of that. But I think this is one of the learnings I had with respect to intentions public policy intentions to curb the power of digital platforms and also to preserve democracy. And just recently, I may also tell you that I wrote a policy paper for a Spanish university, IE University, on the European Union and digital geopolitics, reclaiming digital sovereignty. And I included some of the lessons I learned in the PRODIGEES project. And it's also a call for the European Union not only to look inwards, but also to look outwards and to build alliances with like-minded countries in the global north, in the global south, to reclaim digital sovereignty. So I think maybe it's already on the PRODIGEES website, I'm not sure, but I can give you the link if you want.
Is there anybody else sharing particular access or interactions with policymakers? Because what we've heard is actually both ways. It's not just telling your findings, but also understanding what the needs of policymakers. That's how I understood you as in terms of seeing the process and how that unfolds. Carlos.
I mean, I think it is a process, to be honest, and it's a medium-term process. I don't think my colleagues might think differently, but I don't think we are right now at a position to engage in policy advice as such. But definitely, PRODIGEES opened the door for us to contact and be interacting with like the key actors. Like, for example, I mean, we have Pablo this morning, you know, and the fact that we realize that we are talking about similar things, even when he is coming from the policy practical point of view, and we are more in academia. That's a starting point that probably will end up generating more policy change in the near future, actually. And in our case, maybe it is not directly with us, but definitely our students will be also the ones engaging. Like we already have a few students who graduated with thesis related with different aspects of digital transformation, and they'll start working very soon and increasing our networking. So I think it's a process that, and maybe we are not positioned to do it right now, but definitely in the near future will happen.
I think we all know that the end product of the research is policy influence, policy adoption by the government. In our case, as I mentioned, that some of the project under PRODIGEES is the continuation of our existing project. And based on our experience, we are aware that influencing the policy should start from the beginning of the research. So even from the data collection, designing research, we have to involve the government officials, not the decision makers, but some part of them. And then it will help us when we come up with a recommendation, because they already knew from the beginning. So the acceptance will be much more easier. But we have. I have to admit it's not as Carlos mentioned. Research is one process. Policy advocacy is another process that requires also the strategies and ways how to advocate them to adopt our policy. So this kind of process, but the most important is we know that the government needs a better policy, needs a better data as the evidence-based policy, and about the time is can be very long. For example, we initiate I think Nadia did a research in Bonn about how to use data on climate change, because government very weak in the review and measurement and monitoring. So we like to introduce how this methodology can be adopted by the government, so the government can get a better information and as a base their policy making. But of course, you know, telling them and asking them to use this is, as I say, is a long process. So we are at the start of the policy advocacy, but with the end goals is, you know, policy adoption.
Yes, trying to reply to your questions, Sven. Yes, at least at TI, we produce policy brief and policy recommendation after having done the field work and the research. And I agree that delivering policy recommendation is a process. First of all, we need to, as a researcher, we need to evaluate which type of policymaker we are referring to. So sometimes it's not so easy to identify the correct arena, the policymaker that could receive in some way our policy recommendation. And I think that this is also something that could be related to the differences between the approaches by academia and by think tanks, in the sense that maybe in a think tank, we are more ready to produce policy brief and policy recommendation for our nature, while in the academia, the approach is a little bit different. And I think that this is one of the very important points of the connection between academia and think tanks and institute within this project. And the experience that we did at the Stellenbosch University with the panels regarding how to produce policy brief, how to produce policy recommendation, I think it was very, very useful for all of us. And last but not the least, I think that our duty as researcher is to provoke, in general, policymakers to think out of the box, or to think more on some issues that are already in front of our eyes, or some issues that are not already quite clear to all of us. And thanks to the research, we can provoke this type of debate, of discussion. So I think that it's something that it's important to be done for the future. And of course, it's a process that we need to.
Thank you. And on policy advice, I saw Anita flinch. Yes, as I said, I'm very happy to open up. And if I see you flinch, you get the microphone. So.
I just wanted to share an experience that for me personally, like, my prodigies enabled me to actually engage with policymakers quite closely, because I did 3 secondments, one with FGV and one with Center for Strategic and International Studies, and one here at Istituto Mora, working on the topic of disinformation and how it impacts democracy and societal polarization. And in my research, I applied an analytical framework that has been originally developed by by UNDP, United Nations Development Program, designed for program managers who go into countries and then use it as a framework that helps them to understand how disinformation affects different societies, and how, based on that information, you should develop country programs and how you can design them. And so my research was actually the first empirical application of this framework. And so I had an agreement with UNDP that, following my secondments, I would report back on how useful it had been, how it could be refined, what elements would have to be added. So that was one sort of policy advice that I gave. Then, of course, IDOS being like a mixture between research institution and think tank, then in our discussion papers that we publish based on our research, we always strive to include policy recommendations. So my papers on Mexico and Brazil have already been published, and I conclude with a list of domestic and international policy recommendations. And also the cooperation with UNDP then enabled me to, having conducted my research in Mexico and in Brazil, I was invited by the country office of UNDP to present my research, and they organized a one-day workshop inviting stakeholders from the unfortunately now defunct National Institute of Access to Information and Personal Data Protection that has been scrapped by constitutional reform last year, unfortunately, and also by members of the National Secretary of Anti-Corruption or Corruption Control. I think you might know the correct name. I think it's SNA. So I presented the results from my research in Mexico, but also just having come back from Brazil. So these policymakers and stakeholders are very much interested in learning about the findings from Brazil, learning what colleagues in Brazil were doing differently. So we had quite a day of very engaged debates and participation, which was nice and which was thanks to PRODIGEES who made that possible. Thank you.
And I think it adds to the understanding in terms of exchange of information. And Ingrid made that point of interviews becoming asking information, but also sharing information. And in that, I think it's a gray area. It's not a policy advice up front. You don't go there to tell them, but actually you exchange information. And it's a more natural flow of policy advice. The other point that I heard was also longer term impact in terms of advising future decision makers. If you have it in curricula, if you engage in discussions with policymakers, future policymakers, that's a long-term investment. In our case at IDOS, we also engaged in seminars with the Foreign Office, for instance, where digitalization played a role, and obviously results from field work fed into it. The Foreign Office and the Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development as well. So there were a number of activities. I would probably be hesitant in terms of this particular project engaged us with these stakeholders, but it provided us with substance to engage on the stakeholders. That's our natural environment, our natural working attitude. As you said, Anita, think tank and research institution. You have made some comments already about the points indirectly, but I wanted to ask more explicitly in terms of networks and partnerships that this PRODIGEE project might have created. And sometimes you mentioned it as a personal one or it's institutional linkages. I would be interested in whether PRODIGEES has allowed institutions to expand the geographical focus or disciplinary focus, either one. Has there been broadening of the range of your research in your institutions? Whoever wants to pick up.
threat. Oops. Like to stress now.
I'm gonna be super brief. No, I think what Prodigy make that was really important, at least at Lewis, the fact that it has expanded the geographical horizon that include a new, researchers and collaboration among institutions, European and all around the world. I think it's been a great value for our institution because we are sometimes, we are so focused on what we have to do. And I think Prodigies actually open the perspective in this sense. And what Ingrid said before, I think it's quite important also at academic level, the fact that alliances are more needed than before, alliances among researchers, different perspective, different research agendas. It's not the point, or even like the idea that we have we even can conceptualize the digitalization in a different ways, but still collaboration, networking is really important. And to connect with humans, that's what Carlos was saying before, like secondments are humans actually. So I think Prodigies, he was kind of pioneering in that sense that Alessia made a clear point before. It was visionary, the fact that we need to establish collaboration, like in order to have an impact in the future. So, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yes, it's on. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have always done interdisciplinary research. So for me, I'm always the strange animal in a certain way in my department. But I think it's more important than ever also to, from the very beginning of having students in computer engineering, to teach them also on aspects of ethics, governance of IT, aspects also algorithms and biases. I think this is a big discussion on AI and what's the impact of AI in terms of benefits, but also in terms of possible negative consequences, being it on replacement of jobs or being it on the environment, water consumption, energy consumption, and things like that. So I also think it's very important to have more interaction more geographically. And I think in Germany, for instance, we have an annual conference which is called Republika. It's a conference which was initiated by bloggers, but it's turned to be a huge gathering of people from, let's say, the hacker sector or the nerds, but it's combined with a so-called media convention. So there are lots of people from the media, but also now from public administration, several ministries, even sometimes the chancellor is going to this conference because more than 20,000 people are attending this conference. It's also streamed. You can also watch it online, all the presentations. So it turned out to be also a forum for the interaction between different sectors of society who engage in digitalization. And more people from this global south are also attending it, giving presentations. For instance, also we had last year some people from Kenya who also do content moderation but they formed a trade union because they felt very much exploited, because it's psychologically very, very challenging, the work they have to do to watch 20,000 pictures and videos which are flagged as being offensive, violating community guidelines. And they do also work for AI training, because they have to filter AI so that if you prompt something, the outcome won't be somehow offensive or violating hate speech or giving you an instruction how to construct a bomb or something like that. So this requires a lot of work, invisible work, shadow work, which is, yeah, it takes a toll on the people, and it's performed under very, very bad conditions. So I think there is more to say about the work which is also outsourced to the global south in many instances. The Philippines and Kenya are the centers of this so-called content moderation work, and little is known about that. So what I do in the MGG program, I also offer in the evening to watch the film The Cleaners, which is an investigative film about this work. So I very much recommend to watch it, but not on your own, but to have time to discuss it afterwards, because it's becoming a bit bleak. So, but I think in that respect, it's very important. But I also think in terms of the interaction with civil society actors, it's very important, because I have learned that there is a vibrant civil society in all the countries. We have performed secondments. On the other hand, sometimes there's little interaction with the ministries, or sometimes they can do some advocacy work, but it's more in terms of implementing laws and not so much in terms of creating laws. And sometimes it's, yeah, I think Brazil is a very good example, because, for instance, the Brazilian Data Protection Office, they have a multi-stakeholder advisory board, and civil society organizations are part of this advisory board. And also there are countries where you have more coordination between civil society groups. So I think that's also very important to have something. Some of my interviewees said there has to be an organic interaction between the public administration and the civil society, not in terms of collusion, but in terms of criticizing them, but also in a certain way strengthening those enforcing, for instance, data protection or enforcing AI regulation. So I think that's a very important point, and where we can also learn from countries like Brazil, who have implemented such advisory boards, advocacy for a longer time already. And maybe I may also refer to the Indian model of digital public infrastructures, because I think the term has also spilled over to other countries. It has been implemented by UNDP. In Europe, we have a discussion about public digital infrastructure. So we term it a little bit different. So it's more about infrastructures of the public sector. But we have in India the discussion about the so-called India stack, and we have now a discussion about the so-called Euro stack, which is also something which I think is a spillover from the discussions in India. So I think there is a let's say, translational process also of having ideas of building alternatives, also in terms of open source, open society networks and things like that. So it's going back and forth.
And looking at my left, question on institutional capacities or geographical range, is there something that you would want to add, contribute on that, guys?
I mean, I think for a long time regarding debates on Agenda 2030, sustainable development, and so on. Like one of our main partners has been IDOS, and I think definitely PRODIGEES has opened up the opportunity to reach out and know people from other institutions. I'm not sure how organic is happening at the institutional level, but definitely is happening at the individual level. Like I know that my colleagues are in contact with other colleagues from Italy and Austria and South Africa and so on. And so again, it's like the seed is there to do something else in the future. Right? I definitely think that it has expanded the collection and the horizon of institutional cooperation.
One of the particularities of the program was that the exchanges only happened between Europe going to non-European countries and non-European countries only going to Europe. There wasn't really a network exchange in terms of Brazilians being able to go to South Africa in that scheme. So I think one of the intentions, whether implicit or explicit on the European side, was also to foster this beyond Europe network, making Europe sort of a meeting place for institutions. As to the non-Europeans amongst us, has the project changed any of your perception on Europe, or is that something that you had on this topic area in terms of digitalization and sustainability? Has it become an entity to discuss with, or have you discussed it anyhow? Was it a big item on the agenda for you?
I mean, I'm talking from my very personal point of view, but maybe shared by my colleagues. One of the things that was very surprising for me is to find actually that in terms of digital transformation, there are other countries that are going much faster than Europe, right? And I mean, and I know it sounds maybe it's stupid to say it now, but like at least for me, it was like, okay, so there's the research. The research is not only about like sharing experiences with Germany or Europe, but also we need to look south and know what Brazil is doing, what South Africa is doing, and of course India and Indonesia. I mean, for me that was a very important highlight of the project. Yeah.
I'm looking also at you. If you have questions or comments, please do raise your hand or flinch as Anita did, and I can see you flinch. We talked about the benefits and the positive sides and lots of insights that we have gained through the project. With all the project, every project always does have shortcomings. And now we shouldn't just go into complaining about what didn't work, but I would be interested in the thing that you would change if you could change the project. Maybe you go for one each, and I see flinching over there. Yes, Roberto.
Not completely.
Yeah, I briefly mentioned before in my but the fact I think PRODIGEES was a success in terms of quality. The people that came at Lewis, the people that actually went to the other institutions outside Europe. But in terms of quantity, the European Commission expected something different, expected that we were supposed to send much more researchers, and I think we share the same issue that Roberto just mentioned. Say, okay, it's a great project, you can go in amazing places, but at the same time, the fund is coming later, and it was a little bit difficult. In our case, also I would say the institutional, I don't know how to say it, like in a very nice way, but the infrastructure, the bureaucracy. It's not I'm not complaining about the European Commission bureaucracy, because we are all familiar with the deliverables and the what we have to submit at the end of the project, at midterm. And, but inside our institution, it was very difficult. The preparation of all the documents and the to make things happening, basically. So I'm not complaining again. But still, maybe. But still, in the future, what I envision it's and still I don't have an answer, but to find a slightly easier process in order to make this kind of back and forth of people and researchers moving, because that's actually the beauty of, I would say, of PRODIGEES, much easier. And again, I don't have the answer, so but thank you.
Yeah, I may shortly add that, of course, I mean, it's our willingness would be to have more South-South cooperation as well. And of course, Mexico, Brazil, and I think India as well are considered middle income countries by the European Union. So they are expected to provide grants and funds for people going to other countries. And this is something we had to deal with. We had some internal distribution mechanisms, but still it's not enough. And also in terms of funding, it wasn't a very full funding. So either you had some institutional support, or I had to pay lots of things out of my pocket, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. But of course, it would be better to have more like a networked approach, so that people from those countries could also go to other global South countries. But these are institutional requirements which we cannot overcome easily. On the other hand, I think there are always ways. I mean, in terms of maybe having contact to your international department, or find other ways of funding. Or we had this workshop in South Africa. We had workshops also in Germany in connection with the MGG network, where there was more North-South and South-South cooperation. So in a certain way, we tried to introduce that element also. And also in terms of training, knowledge. I mean, the reporting requirements are quite strict, and it's really a lot what we have to produce also in terms of documents. I think, of course, it's okay because it's taxpayers' money. So we also have to be accountable for that. So I think it's okay.
From an IDOS perspective, I think I would absolutely concur with Ingrid in terms of the network approach would have been nice. It's European funding, so it comes with that particular agenda. We managed to create some internal structure, but that would be my major point that I would say see as criticism. And the one thing that we could not influence that basically kept us from fully expanding the potential at short notice was the first secondment happening at Ingrid going back because of COVID, and that's force majeure, and there's nothing to do about it. We extended for 2 years, and I think we actually did quite well in that regard. And still delivering. But this mechanism in terms of networking, rather more networking, I think would be the element that I would mention.
Yeah, you already raised several important points on which I totally agree, and not for complaining. I just had some few aspects. The first one is the fact that the main problem or the main challenge is to find researchers who are available to leave the country or their own research and to be focused on a new line of research or on a new aspect or on a parallel aspect of their own research. Sometimes I know that 1 month is not enough to do a research, but sometimes ask to a research to do 1 month of fieldwork abroad sometimes could be quite challenging. And the other point is that maybe we need to consider the importance, together with research, also the importance of training in terms of lifelong learning process for researchers. So maybe, and I guess for the future, this could be something on which we can reflect. The training is itself very, very important also for research, for young research or for senior research, again, in terms of lifelong learning process, and in terms of activities of training together with research that they could do on the together with the field work.
Thank you. Perhaps this is not the time to talk. Perhaps after this session, but in my perspective, is exit strategy that has not been communicated, in advance. What are we going to do after this project? I think this is important because after keeping 5 years, together, this is something that's very invaluable, and we need to keep it. Perhaps we also can utilize the platform that most of us are there, like T20 Global Solution and also MGGs. I think we need to think how to continue this platform in different platform. I think that's.
Well, I mean, we have the same issue with the funding. Of course, we are very grateful, at least from the perspective of Instituto Mora. We found, and you as IDOS and everyone involved, different ways, also in University of Hamburg, different ways to solve the funding. But I think something that is very important is if I was doing this again, I think as a steering committee, we need to be a little bit more sensitive of what it takes in terms of convincing our colleagues and in terms of an alignment of interests, right? Just to give an example, in our case, I mean, we are an academic institution and we are basically assessed by the number of books that we publish, the number of articles that we publish, and the number of theses that we direct, just to mention some of the main indicators. So it sounds very nice to say, I'm going to go 1 month to Hamburg, which is an amazing city, or to Bonn and visit my friends and do work. But if that is not aligned with what is required locally in terms of my productivity indicators, it just becomes a little bit difficult because as a researcher, I start to question, okay, it takes time. I need to leave 1 month. I need to leave my family behind. I need to leave responsibilities behind. And how is going to yield this in terms of productivity? So I think there are some products that have been now mentioned and that will be discussed as part of this final conference, like, for example, a collective book that I think it will have been very, very useful if right from the beginning we had foreseen that. because I know, maybe not me personally, but I know that for some of my colleagues, that gives direction, because yes, I'll do a secondment, but it's going to end up in a product which is going to give me something in terms of productivity. And that's what I mean by alignment of interests. And I think as a steering committee, we need to be more sensitive to those agendas, which are very legitimate at the individual and at the collective level.
Thanks. And yes, Simona, see. Yeah, please. In your microphone. You probably do, because it's for the back of the. I hope this is on.
Yeah, thanks. I just something that begin, but I think it was limiting a bit the work of the researchers. We didn't have the opportunity, many of us, to go to the different countries. So our engagement with colleagues from the different countries were only a few occasions along the process, like this general meeting. And we can talk a little bit with people from South Africa, Brazil, or wherever. So we know that was a problem at the beginning, but I think it can be in the future if we do another project like that, that kind of limit. You know, we tried, my colleague from Italy know very well, we tried to get secondment to Italy and also some other parts, but, you know, beside the funds, the issue was the structure of the project itself. And this has to do with a lot of things. So I'm not going to open the Pandora box there, but that thing, I think that it's the idea of having more, if you want, benefits from the interchange, that would be also very good.
Thanks. And maybe to end on a positive note, one thing you would want to keep, and I can probably start with that. I would say that the joint activities, this network interaction, is something that we are definitely going to keep. We have the instrument for that, and I think we should actually maintain that and try to build on that. We have a bit more time to discuss in terms of what outcomes we have and where to build on it, but this interaction for me would be the key thing. If you have a quick round, if it's only one word, great. Where do we start? Medelina, do you want to start this time?
It cannot be one word because we know that along the process, we know that Europe are very advanced and become the hub of digitalization. And we for CSIS, for example, we realize only little research, you know, on the Europe side. So the continuation and also perhaps more attention and focus that we can take the benefit from the research that exploring, you know, the European issues on digitalization.
Just few words. I think that right now, after these years together, we have the base to continue to, in some way, reflect on the same topics or on other topics connected to them. And I think that this is one of the most important results, together, of course, with networks, with the secondments and so on and so forth. But in this project, we are different topics, different perspectives. Sometimes they could be not interconnected among them, sometimes yes. And now, definitely, it's important to find more and more the nexus between all the topics that we raised before. So, yes, it's a good hope. I mean, in some way for the future.
Yeah, of course, we want to keep the contacts and interactions to be a continuing process, also in terms of really creating bonds and strengthening bonds. I think the MGG network is perfect for that, also in terms of having some regular exchanges. I think what I want to keep is also the multi-perspectivity of the approaches, both in terms of disciplinary multi-perspectivity, but also in terms of geographic interactions. And I want to keep the critical and reflective perspective on digitalization and the exchange both with public administration and civil society organizations, because I think academic work is not neutral. It has to really combine all kinds of stakeholders and also yeah, you have to engage with all the parties involved. So, but I think as academics, we also have a advocacy responsibility in terms of strengthening marginalized voices, making them more visible. And in that respect, I think we also had some impact in PRODIGEES.
Okay, you stole majority of the words I want to use, but sometimes I have in mind it's the making research that has a societal impact. We say over again in academia all the time, but we are so much focused on publication and sometimes we just, miss the focus, the target. And I think what Prodigy actually achieved to make research that has an impact, maybe not in immediate terms, but in long terms, yes. So researching at the edge, so very innovative topics. So yeah, thank you.
Well, this will say that.
Thank you very much. You also did a very good job. It's 1:45 in Johannesburg. It's like 4:45 in the morning, I think, in Jakarta, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much. We have a break now, and maybe there is going to be instruction for what we do after the break. And the program says it's Matthias, but he's not here, so it's probably Wolf or Ben who can give us a bit more insights.
Yeah, thank you very much. In the interest of time and also in interest of different formats of the conference and a little bit of mobility, we have the idea that anyone who feels like having a coffee or like refreshments, you can find that in the back of this room. That's maybe the first step for some of us. Then there is some optional steps here in the room. It is connected to the discussions we just had, and we set it up there. It will be there also the other day, so it's not going away. It's called the PRODIGEES Memory Board, and we are trying to collect interesting, maybe also personal highlights, experiences from whatever happened during the project. Someone, I don't know, I don't want to give examples now, but can also be funny stuff. So something maybe you want to leave here. Then a technical point, whoever joined Instituto Mora or our discussions only after the registration at the plaza, so the other side of, you are not on the signature list, and keeping up with good EU bureaucracy, we are very interested in your signatures. And this is something we would like you to please complete here. Maybe it's just a small number of people, but if you're, who's not there, please help by doing that. And final point is the instruction to, did I forget something? We can do this later, I think. Final point would be the instruction for what is after the break. And we have set up outside a small little exhibition as announced by Ben earlier today. And it was carefully curated and prepared by our dear colleague Matthias, who unfortunately fell sick. So he's in the hotel and does not know what's going, or cannot observe what he has strategically planned. And Ben and I will now quickly walk you through what is on the paper you will get here. I will just kick you off with the two first points on this and then hand over to you. So this is an exercise to walk. This is an exercise to come together with a person you have not spoken to a lot yet, a person that ideally you don't know, maybe. You don't know well. That's very important for the network sustainability aspect of that, and also to bring a bit of a diversity here. So I don't want to see Sven and Ingrid in a pair now. you are walking through the gallery, okay? Because I know you're spending 6 or 7 years together now. So there's more diversity needed. And once this is the first thing that you're going to do when you stand up, you look for someone, or you already have someone in mind you're going to talk to, and that you will go in pairs. That's the most important step.
Yes, the most important step. You will go in pairs and then you will reflect. You will share your thoughts. What does this particular artwork that you are looking at mean to you? We have reflection questions on the bottom of the paper that you can see. And your job is to react to those questions, to start a conversation, start a dialogue amongst each other, and to share that space. Especially reflect towards the topic of digitalization and sustainability. So even if some of the pictures that you will see may not seem obvious, right? Your goal is to connect the topic, the theme of this conference, to the photo. I think it'll be easier than I'm giving you a suggestion. Or leave a trace. We want you to not only talk, but write, draw. Whatever you feel, put it onto the pictures. These pieces of art are not just for looking at. Please interact with them. Do not be shy. We will have markers at each station, at each picture. So,
and maybe just to conclude, we have a quarter to 4 now. On the piece of paper, you say that we see there's the time for the departure of the bus. I think we can move it a little bit earlier. So if we say we are going to have an hour for this exercise, including the break, then we are coming together. And where are the pictures? That's a good question. There's 2 points, so it's not all in one place. There's the nice kiosk in the garden of Istituto Mora, and you will find the majority of the paintings and the images there. And there's another setup here in the ground floor. Just this there. No, not this one, but the ground floor and the entrance to the garden where we had the buffet. Actually, there's the other one. And for those who are interested, what these pictures are like, you just look at the flip side of the paper and you'll find a small little overview of what it is. Maybe it also, there's something of particular interest, you go there with your partner. And we hope that we will then meet again in 1 hour full of inspiration in the garden and with new friends. So let's do it. Yes, you can destroy the papers. If you feel like you can, no, but you can add to that. They're not meant to be clean. We don't want empty pages.
probably
But you can also take the design down the garden